Hello, welcome to my channel, Inflightmuzik. Today I just want to go over a couple concepts that might help you with your melodies. Okay, first I'm just going to record a simple chord progression. We're just using simple triads, 3-note chords throughout this chord progression. Now most good melodies are based off of the chords in general. They'll play notes that are within the chord. But what I want to teach you today is not to restrict yourself to just playing notes in the chord. But that is a good starting point. Basically, all we're going to do is just duplicate all these notes up top. Alright, so we have the second variation laid out. Again, it's just the same chords, but in a higher octave. Now you can see right here on the bottom chords, all we did was just play the notes individually, one at a time, throughout each bar. So basically that gives you a feel of movement and rhythm within your chords, and while still maintaining the overall feel of the chords on top. Now you could do that the other way around as well. This is traditionally what people will do more often. They'll have the chords playing on bottom and then they'll break up the chords on top. But in order to get a more musical sound, really what you could do is create two different rhythms. The bottom having one rhythm and the top having another rhythm. On the bottom I have a faster rhythm and on top I just have a slower rhythm. Okay, I was gonna just stop this tutorial because I'm realizing I'm not very good at explaining the way that I make my melodies, and I don't want to confuse anyone, but I'm still gonna go over some techniques, some concepts that might help you, just in case there's someone out there that needs to hear this. But overall, this melody tutorial is definitely not complete. It's not everything that I want to teach you, but hopefully over time I'll figure out a way to explain exactly what it is that I'm doing that's different from everyone else. But in the meantime, I want to show you this last technique. Basically, if you take what I showed you by playing two chords at the same time and breaking up those chords into individual notes, you can add in additional notes that don't belong inside of either of those chords. Now you can tell that it's just a lot more musical by not restricting yourself to just the notes that are inside of the chord. Now what's the secret behind knowing what notes to hit? There really is no secret. A lot of people will tell you to learn music theory to help you learn what notes to play, and that can be a problem. I've seen tutorials that tell you to jump up a certain amount of notes, to come back down a certain amount of notes, to hit this note there, and a lot of that is misleading. The truth is, I said this in the previous video, in my chords video, the truth is, any note is going to work. You just have to stick to the notes that are inside of the scale. Here I have G major highlighted, and you can see that every single one of these notes are playing something that's inside of the scale. The thing that makes melodies interesting is the rhythm of the notes that you're playing in the scale. That's really all it is. You should be able to have freedom to create whatever you're feeling in that moment. You shouldn't have to think about, well, let me go to the perfect fifth, or let me go down 3 notes in the scale, or any of that. It's all nonsense. It won't help you to make a better melody. In fact, it will restrict you from making good melodies. This is what keeps a lot of producers sounding like the very next producer that you listen to. It's putting you in a box by making the same type of melodies as everyone else. If you just take the simple concepts that I just showed you with just using 2 chords and breaking those chords up into individual notes and just feeling your rhythm, you're going to come up with much better melodies than you ever have. Especially when you start adding notes outside of the scale and having confidence that every note is okay to play. It's just up to you whether or not you want to play it. That's really the secret about music. It's what you don't play, what you decide not to play. That's why scales in general are so amazing, because it's telling you you can't play this, you can't play that, you can't play this or that or that or that. Now there are exceptions to that rule, like in jazz and blues, and even R&B. We'll add notes that are outside of the scale, but we're not playing them directly. We're gliding them into the notes that we're already playing, which is the next thing that I want to show you. Now you can see that this note, by the way, I played that really terribly. I'm really trying to just show you this concept in general. You could hear that these notes are just gliding into the notes that are inside of the scale each time. I'm not staying on these notes that are outside of the scale too long. This is how you get those accents in R&B and neo soul and trap soul. They're gliding from notes that are outside of the scale and going right back into the scale. And here I did something really special. I added an entire chord that's not inside of the scale. You should experiment with that. The way you do that is by using chords from other scales that use a majority of the notes that are inside of your scale. Here with this chord, you can see that this note is outside of the scale, but all of the other notes are inside of the scale in the chord. You'll find all of the additional chords that work for your music just by doing that, just by adding one note that doesn't belong in the scale inside of your chord. Every time you do that, you'll notice that all of those individual chords that you play that have that one note outside of the scale have a certain feel to them. This is used all the time in gospel. They're sticking to one scale, and then when you hear that odd chord that's off, but it still harmonizes, it's because it just has one note that's outside of the scale, and all the other notes are inside of the scale. But on top of that, you'll notice that this wants to resolve into a different chord than I have here. That's where experience comes in. You want to base your melody off of the notes in the chord, of course. But if you branch outside of the notes in the chord, you're going to come up with much better melodies, I promise you. I'm just sticking to notes that are inside of the scale. I'm keeping in mind what the notes are being played inside of the chord, but overall, I'm just going by feel, what I feel in that exact moment. Do I want to go up? Do I want to go down? I'm not counting steps. I'm not counting, oh, is this a perfect fifth? None of that. None of that really matters. That's just going to put you in a box. Another trick that you could use to help you come up with melodies is literally just playing two completely different chords. So if you're going by, all right, let me just stick to the notes inside of the chord, it would be a good idea to actually play a completely different chord on top than you're playing on bottom. I'm playing a higher chord here, and then on bottom I'm playing a lower chord, which is typically what I recommend if you're using this two chord technique. Not literally just the higher notes, but the higher notes that are inside of your scale. If you go the other way around, you'll get a more jumbled up feel. This is what it sounds like if you flip those. It just sounds like a mess. So typically you want to do it the other way around. So even here, I'm just playing notes that are inside of the chord that I just made. But here, I'm adding notes outside of the chord that I make. Here again, I'm just adding all kinds of notes that are outside of the chord and just going down the scale. You don't have to have huge jumps in the scale, going up or going down, skipping over notes. None of that is really something that's going to dictate whether your melody is good or not. You really want to go by feel. Do you feel like the music needs to rise up? Well, start rising up in the scale. Start playing notes that are going up in the scale. Do you feel like the notes need to come down? Then just start playing notes coming down in the scale. And that doesn't mean that you should literally just play the notes one at a time going down in the scale. You can skip notes, just like I did here. Overall, I feel like this is probably the worst tutorial that I'm ever going to do. And it's because I really feel like I'm not getting my point across. The main thing that I want you to take away from this is that when it comes to melodies, there's hardly any rules at all. There's more rules in your chords than there are for your melodies. For your melodies, you can really do whatever you want, as long as you're playing notes inside of the scale. And even that's not a rule. Now, again, I didn't play that very well, but you could definitely see that these notes are not inside of the scale. And this is used a lot in blues and in jazz. They're taking notes that are outside of the scale, and they're just adding them in by going right back into the scale. You're just bridging notes that don't really belong together, but by really focusing on the notes that are in the scale, like we do here, you could tell that these notes that aren't in the scale are a lot shorter than the notes that are inside of the scale. You're going to be able to use notes that are outside of the scale. Another thing that you'll notice that the notes are right next to each other. That's just going to create a smoother transition into the notes back into the scale. If this did help you out, please do subscribe because I have a lot more videos that are a lot more efficient and a lot more knowledgeable than what I just presented here. So until the next video, take care, and I hope that this helped you out in some way, shape, or form. Peace.